It's hours before game time, and Minneapolis Star-Tribune sports columnist Pat Reusse is at the season opener of the Minnesota Wild hockey season.
I like hockey characters, but the up and down of the game doesn't do much for me. As you know, I grew up in the southwest corner, and we never had hockey. The first hockey game I ever saw, I covered for the Duluth paper, so I'm not a big hockey guy, I gotta admit that, but I try my best.
Pat Reusse and characters of the sports scene have gone hand in hand for nearly 50 years. Readers have grown accustomed to his style of tell it like it is.
Tonight with the Wild, if they come out and beat the Stanley Cup cold-favored Flames 7-1, I'll probably write something good. If they get beat 7-1, I'll probably get on them for being cheap, you know? So it's up to them, not me.
Minnesotans and Wisconsinites have also grown accustomed to Reusse's versatility. He's a regular on Mike Max's locally televised sports show.
How about the Gopher Hoopers? 5-11, I said before the season started in the Big Ten. Is that about it?
Michigan looked real good beating Duke. Illinois looked good beating Clemson.
You have to have somebody that will challenge Sid, that will challenge Dark, that will challenge a theory I have. And he'll challenge it. He won't just accept it when you throw something out there. And you have to have that in that show, because you can't just say whatever anybody says is fact.
Because you can get a letter now if you show up for school.
Have you seen these things?
Oh, yeah.
You gotta see these damn things. They're down here and down here, and you look and you thought, boy, that kid must be the most honored. This kid must be the most honored athlete of all time, and he was 6th trumpet in the marching band or something.
Patrick added to his diversity resume when he joined Joe Garage Logic Souchere on KSTP AM radio over 2 decades ago.
But what we probably recognized from the start, we didn't even know what to call it at the time, because it's called chemistry now, and we just have that. And what we've learned over the years is that we're just lucky to have it, because you can't make it, and you can't find it, and you can't manufacture it. I just think maybe we just have the same outlook on the world.
Johnson and Harding being merged for hockey is worse than Fulda and Slayton being merged in any sport.
Because their coach called here today, and I think he was reading his resume. I think one of Pat's greatest gifts is that he doesn't know how funny he is. His inflections and his speech patterns are innately funny. And he doesn't, I don't think he plays on that. I don't think he realizes that, so therefore, they keep coming.
How long we had you now?
Since April of '91. I mean, it's been over the course of the years, it's just been fun to get to know them and just to see them perform, you know, every day on the radio. And it's just like, it's so natural to them. You know, sport-wise and just regular show-wise, Reusse calls, and his life is an open book.
We decided to go out and about some 150 miles southwest of the Twin Cities to the town where Pat Reusse grew up, where memories are rampant. A peaceful place called Fulda, Minnesota, home of the wood duck.
He had the carp save his life out at Second Lake there when he walked into the hole if it wasn't full of carp.
Ironically, on this morning, Pat was meeting some longtime friends in a building on Main Street that still bears the Reusse name, where the 4 Reusse boys, Pat's dad and his 3 brothers, once ran the town funeral parlor and furniture store.
Home of the wood duck. I gotta tell you, I lived here till 1962, never saw a wood duck. How did we become the home of the wood duck?
That's we got them when they come up with the name. We don't have them anymore.
Oh,
I don't know what happened. No, you don't see anything.
Stories lasted most of the morning. They ranged from the time they faked one of them was dead in one of the caskets at the Reusse funeral home to the day fire broke out in Fritz Chafee's house. Turns out it wasn't the house, but his outhouse.
And we pulled in, and Eric says, for Christ's sake, he said, the house is on fire. And he goes over and pulls the door open. Flat says, well, what the hell are you doing here? We're smoking fish.
We came away with a pretty good idea where Patrick got his sense of humor. and his love of finding characters to feature in his columns.
Every one of these little towns, it doesn't have to be your hometown, every one of these little towns has a great story in it. And I still love to go to the town team baseball tournament every year and discover some, character from the hometown. And
you've made a living out of telling stories about people like
they are in Fulda. Oh yeah, but Fulda's no different than Sleepy Eye or 300 other towns in this state. And all you got to do is pull off the side of the road. There's a story there because they're all characters. No, here was bowling alley. This was the bar and a bowling alley. My Uncle Harry owned that way back when in the early 50s.
Let you bowl for nothing.
Late 40s, I was a little young.
I got 9 cents a line for setting pins. I made a lot of money. At 9 cents a line.
9 cents a line.
You bet.
Turns out one of those characters is Patrick's cousin Eddie Reusse, a retired colonel in the Marines who returned to Fulda. Not that Cousin Eddie's a loose cannon, but he's now in charge of the city's newly restored cannon.
You put it on a trailer, and we fire it any place. We fired it in the town of Dundee. We damn near got thrown out of there. We fired it in the city of Avoca. We fired it right down the main street in the city of Slayton.
That's a good spot to fire.
We fire it out over the lake here every Memorial Day.
As the tour of Fulda continues, we learn the appalling news that Pat Reusse was actually tossed out of the altar boys at beautiful St. Gabriel's Church.
I might have had 2 good years of being an altar boy, and then Daniel Wegerty and I got thrown out.
Why do you get booted as an altar boy?
I think they heard us saying a word that we weren't supposed to say. That's what I recall. But I think just maybe associating with Daniel got me thrown out because he was a bit of a troublemaker. I always looked myself somewhat saintly, but
you want to go in and
maybe I overrated my own behavior. I don't know.
Go in right now and repent.
Okay, I'll do that. Let's get in there. Hopefully, if there's anybody in the confessional, I'll see you in about 2 weeks.
The old St. Gabriel's grade school is right next door to the church, a statue of the Blessed Virgin still standing, honoring Pat's mom, Cecile, who died at only 53 years of age in the early 1960s. One autumn day in duck season during his mom's illness, Pat got into more trouble when his dad asked one of the nuns if she would excuse Patrick from school.
He says, "It's a family emergency. I need Patrick Reusse." So the nun excuses me, and knowing about my mother's situation, she thinks maybe she's taking a real bad turn here, so she makes all my classmates get down on their knees on the linoleum and say a rosary. Well, the old man wanted me to go out to Badger Lake and help him pick up ducks, because he and my Uncle Carl have been out there banging maybe a couple more than the limit all morning, and they hadn't been picking them up. They've been floating across the lake, so we went out. So I was the retriever, and we went out in the boat and picked up ducks. But that was kind of a unique twist. Yeah, I think they all had sore knees. They were all, when they found out my mother was still doing well, they were very bitter. Ed, you got a new and improved outhouse.
A trip back home wouldn't be complete for Patrick unless he visited the old duck hunting camp on Badger Lake just outside of town.
Of course, there's where I had my Poseidon adventure when I had a nice duck hunting boat right there along the dock and stepped in and ended up in this much water face down.
For Pat Reusse, writer, TV and radio star, teller of stories, this was really home as a kid. It was like being in the Delta Marsh. Why, Pat didn't even write for the Fulda High School newspaper. Back then, a day in the duck blind was top priority. But a light went on in 1963 when he took a job as a copy boy for the Minneapolis Tribune and was hooked on journalism.
Right then, because I got in that newsroom and I loved it. I loved the atmosphere, the characters, the chaos, the excitement of a Friday prep night.
We don't agree on a lot of things, but we still get along, and I gave him his first job. In fact, they all tell this story how he was a copy at our paper, and he didn't show up, and I found him in some beer joint and told him either come to work or he's going to get fired.
Pat's first job as a reporter was at the Duluth newspaper for $76 a week. From there, he went to St. Cloud, then St. Paul in 1968, then Minneapolis in 1988. Among his most memorable events,
Puckett's home run in Game 6 is hard to beat. And Jack Morris in Game 7 is hard to beat. But Denny walking off the field after Morton Anderson's field goal is pretty hard to beat, too. Watching the look on that jerk's face after he lost that one. And whenever I say that, I get a round booing from the crowd. They don't like that.
We'll give him credit, too, outside the rules. I think that he's matured as a player, too. I really...
Reusse has also ruffled the feathers of many other coaches and players over the years, but says he's just looking for a reaction, trying to make people think.
I think Patrick Reusse is perhaps one of the best writers because even when he rips you, he's so creative that you have to enjoy it.
He's been here a long time, and people identify Patrick with Twin Cities writers. I mean, it's I don't want to make the comparison, but people think they certainly know who Sid is, and I think they certainly know who Patrick is.
I think from a baseball standpoint, he knows more about the game than any guy who ever wrote baseball in the history. I think he lives the game, and I think that's just, he's good on all sports, but I think baseball is without a doubt his number one thing. And he's a great writer and a pretty good reporter.
I think he's one of the three greatest sports writers that ever lived. Red Smith, Jim Murray, and Pat Reusse. And out of all the writers I've ever read, I think those three stand above everybody else.
So to watch Pat Reusse do his thing, it becomes more evident that his goal in life is to get a rise out of folks like you and me, to give us the needle, get under our skin.
And you know, the funny thing is, the guys you think you're feuding with, when they're done, we get along. You know, Blyleven and I couldn't get along at all when I covered the Twins. Now I consider him a guy that I get along with great.
And Patrick likes it that way. Stay with us. We go out and about to visit old Gator Jack from Everglades City. Still ahead on Out and About.